Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Coding 101 is provided by CacheFly at CacheFly.com.
This episode of Coding 101 is brought to you by DigitalOcean. Simple and fast cloud hosting built for developers. Deploy an SSD cloud server in 55 seconds. Try it today for free. Visit DigitalOcean.com, and once you sign up, be sure to enter the promo code C101 in the billing section for a $10 credit. Today on Coding 101, it's time for a Wildcard episode. Hello and welcome to Coding 101. It's a Twitch show where we let you into the wonderful world of the Code Monkey / Code Warrior. I'm Father Robert Ballecer, the digital Jesuit. And as always, joining me is my super ridiculously intelligent King Kamehameha co-host, Lou Maresca. Lou, thank you very much for coming back.
Hey, Padre, good to see you.
Now, it should be noted that Lou and I are we're communicating over Hangouts right now because Skype is having a little bit of a hiccup. But that's not going to stop us from doing our appointed rounds because we've got a special guest on this week for this Wildcard episode. Ladies and gentlemen, it is Sarah Dutkiewicz. I probably did not say her last name correctly, but she's going to correct me. Sarah, what is the proper pronunciation of your name?
It's Dutkiewicz.
Dutkiewicz. I will probably get that wrong 5 or 6 times, but it's so nice to have you on the show. Now,
thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for being here. Now, Lou, you know Sarah. You're the one who introduced her to Coding 101, so you go back a ways.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Back in college, I used to go to the Unix user groups that Sarah used to attend and talk at, so I just knew that she'd be perfect for this.
Sarah, let's lay down some of your bona fides. There's a reason why we're speaking to you here on Coding 101.
Okay.
And that is you've been in the programming game for a very, very long time. And in fact, you are one of Microsoft's MVPs. You are a .NET expert, among other things. And you've really immersed yourself in the field. Can you give us a little bit of your background? Where did you come up? Where did you learn? Where did you earn your chops?
Where did I earn my chops? Where did I learn? So I was exposed to programming very early from what my family tells me. I come from non-technical parents. Neither of my parents really worked with computers much, but my uncle was into programming. So I guess when I was 2 years old, he just had me sit and watch him program, and I kind of just took it in at that point. A few years later, actually by about 8th grade or so, we were using Apple IIe's and exposed to AppleSoft Basic. So we had a book that was probably about yay thick on just, these are the various commands out there going into graphics and animation. And for me, I picked it up, and I had no idea why I picked it up so nicely. And we didn't have computers at home, so for me, it was like, I don't know why I get this. Fast forward a little bit into high school, I managed to get a copy of Visual Basic. It fell off a truck, for lack of a better story. But it was one of those where I was just like, this is interesting. To me, I remember the logic stuff from regular AppleSoft Basic. I'm like, Visual Basic, so let's drag and drop and put some things here and see how this works. What happens if I double click? Oh, this is pretty cool. So I started figuring out how Visual Basic worked. Ended up creating an address book. I released this freeware. And then I also created a math facts program. I have a brother who's 8 years younger than me, so I figured put my programming skills to use for him to see how that works. Later on, I was working on our high school's website using Adobe PageMill and entering in content. But one of the guys who was helping with the site said, hey, Sarah, why don't you learn HTML? And I'm like, well, who's this guy to ask me about programming? And then second of all, what's this HTML stuff? This sounds pretty cool. And so I ended up learning HTML at this guy's recommendation and running with it. Turned out I love the web stuff.
Sarah, I want to back up a little bit, Sarah, because you buried something at the beginning. That you started with an Apple IIe?
Yeah, for the part that I can remember. I don't know when I was 2 years old, I don't know what my uncle showed me the code on, but we had an Apple IIe.
Was that your that was your first real computer? Did you have any other computers at that time that you were playing around with?
No, Apple IIes were what we had at the grade school. We had no computers at home. My first actual real computer that we had at our house was a compact Presario 486. Well, so I got into it a little later than some people.
If you were an Apple IIe person, how did you make that jump to the, I'm going to call it the discounted version of Visual Basic?
The Visual Basic was a few years after the Apple IIe.
Oh, once you had moved on.
Yeah, once we got a computer at home, we just got a Windows thing. And so it was a Windows machine, and that's one of the kids that I was babysitting happened to find Visual Basic for me and said, "Hey, Sarah, you might understand something with this. Go play." And I was like, "This is awesome."
So, Sarah, after the first couple languages, you said HTML and then Apple Basic, AppleSoft Basic, Visual Basic. What else? No, what other languages did you learn over the years, and how did you kind of get into C# and really learn that craft?
Yeah. So shortly after HTML, the first, what I like to call my first real language, where I had more formal training, was Perl. And so the crazy twistedness of Perl, I learned regular expressions. So much fun. After that, I moved into learning at college. We got into C++, and then we got into Java. And after graduating college, I got into Python and Ruby, just through conferences and catching sessions on these things and reading blogs and video tutorials, all sorts of things like that. Got into some Groovy a little bit.
College?
What's that?
I said, wait, we got into Java at college? I don't remember that class.
Yeah. The only reason why I remember that is because I hated it back then. It ran so dog slow on my machine. Now, where I'm at now, I teach. I'm a teaching assistant, and we do C# in one group and Java in another. And I told the instructor when they hired me, I'm like, fair warning. When it comes to Java, I hate it. I haven't seen it in 10 years, but it was dog slow then. I've given it a fair share, though, and I like it now. It's not too bad.
Yeah, I got to jump in on that. Were you one of these people who just assumed that Java was going to die because it wasn't as fast as the compiled languages? You could kind of see the promise, but it always seemed to be just promise. They always said, oh, the next version is going to be so much better, and the next generation of hardware is going to make this really run, and we never saw it. I remember thinking, I was fooled by it for the first 5 years, but after that, I thought, no, this is not going anywhere. Were you in that camp?
Well, yeah, it was one of those where I didn't think it was going to die because I know that some old programming languages, while slow and inefficient, they still don't die. I figured it would be in that group. I figured it would just get more awful over time. I didn't think it would get better over time.
And yet, it has. Or
it has got, it's not so painful. Like my apprentices here at the Guild, they run Java in the Linux environment using Ubuntu, and I run their code on my Windows machine. And I don't have to wait forever for the JVM to start. I don't have to wait forever for Java to load. Right. It's a whole different world nowadays.
All right, let's back up. I want to talk to all three of us here for a second. We talked about 0 days recently because we were talking about stage fright and how it is so scary to the Android community. And one of the stats that came out during that whole discussion was the fact that Java hasn't had a 0 day since 2013. In fact, 2013 was sort of the high water mark, and after that, you could say it's become a mature language.
Oh yeah.
Should we be giving it more props than we do? Because it is a much maligned language among programmers. It's sort of like, well, you do Java if you have to, but no one says I want to program Java.
Well, and those who do say they love Java are the Android developers. Otherwise, Java in the enterprise, some people are just like, oh, that's so boring. Whereas we teach it here because we know that there is a demand for it in the enterprise. We know that people do like using Java for business applications.
That's right. I think Google's done wonders for Java, especially the different virtual machines that they have now and the different variants that they have, the performance that is done on it. I think it's done wonders for that language, and that's why it'll keep living on, I guess, beyond its deemed years before Oracle got a hold of it.
Right. Sarah, could you just run down really quickly what are the languages that you hold in your stable?
So that's Perl, Python, Ruby, JavaScript, CSS, HTML, Groovy, Java, and C#, and Visual Basic and VB.NET and a bunch of basic variants.
And what do you find yourself, because everyone has languages that they have, but there always seems to be that language that given no preference in what the project is, they'll always seem to default to. What's yours?
Right now, my default is probably going to be C# if I'm doing backend stuff. If I'm doing front-end stuff, it's HTML, CSS, JavaScript with jQuery.
So C#. Now, do you choose C# just because you are so into .NET, or do you just like the syntax? Do you like the way that it looks? Do you like the way that it feels?
It's funny. I actually don't mind the syntax. I like how it works. Going into C#, I have true confession here. When I first looked at C#, I said, I am not going to touch it. I hate curly brace languages. I hate semicolon languages. They're just difficult for me to deal with. I'm a VB girl. I'm a VB.NET kind of deal. I love things in plain English. Love the readability. I got hired to be in a C# position with 0 years of C# experience because I picked up languages for jobs in the past. Ended up becoming an MVP in my second year in that job. And it's just one of those, for me, C# is just, it's what I know, it's what I can pick up really fast. So that's why I prefer it on the server side. Now, if you toss me on the Unix or Linux side, then I'll probably say Java. And again, that's because that's what I'm doing here at the Guild. We do C#, we do Java. These are languages I see every day just about. So,
Sarah, you are an MVP. And that's a term that gets thrown around quite a bit. There are still some people out there who don't understand what the MVP program is at Microsoft. Could you explain what does it mean that you're an MVP?
Sure. So the Microsoft MVP program, the MVP stands for Most Valuable Professional. So what that means is that Microsoft, be it Microsoft employees or other MVPs, saw my community contributions. They saw the fact that I was speaking at user groups. They saw that I was blogging at codinggeek.com. They probably saw that I was running clevelandtechevents.com, so tracking the various user groups here in the Cleveland, Ohio and Akron, Ohio areas. So they saw that I had a presence. They saw the message I carried. They said, hey, she should be one of us. So what that means is that I'll get to fly out to Redmond here in November and meet with the Visual Studio team, meet with the guys who create the C# language, give them feedback. Being an MVP, you're in the community. You've got the ears and the eyes to see how are people using these languages and tools. What do they like? What don't they like? You take that feedback to Microsoft and say, you know what, this sucks. Here's why. Here's what we can do to fix it. And they actually listen to us. We've seen them implement our suggestions into the tools and into the language. So it's pretty cool as an MVP, and I'm really thankful that they've renewed me. This is my 7th year as an MVP. My contributions have dropped a little bit, but that's because in the past couple of years I became a mom. I have a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old. So trying to juggle that plus community engagements can be entertaining. But Microsoft still sees value in what I do in the community, and so they've renewed me, which appreciate it.
Excuses. Just motherhood is going to take away your time. No.
Right. So one thing, Sarah, that you said is Microsoft was kind of watching your contributions to the community and so on. Do you think, how did they kind of get in contact with you? Did they just email you one day or message you one day and say, hey, we want you to be an MVP? How do you kind of get involved exclusively with that program?
So I know I caught the eyes of either Microsoft and employees or other Microsoft MVPs. I have suspicions as to who, but it was one of those where they had to nominate me. And then the MVP program sent me an email and said, hey, Sarah, you've been nominated for an MVP award. So send us your past contributions for the year. Let us know, like, where did you speak? What did you speak on? About how many people did you speak with? Just so they can gauge your presence and gauge your contributions that way. Other things they may look at are you publishing? Are you posting on various forums, on the MSDN forums? Are you like John Skeet on Stack Overflow, answering questions like crazy? Are you conference organizing, user group organizing, speaking? They look at the huge presence overall. And then based on that, and I imagine they compare us to other people who are already in the MVP program, and then talking to the product teams to see, okay, is this person worthy of the program? How do we have a budget to include them in? And then they bring us in if they feel that we meet whatever they're looking for.
I do want to. Oh, I'm sorry. I just wanted to give a shout out because we've got Chris P in the chat room who was mentioning that he was awarded MVP 5 times, and yeah, it is kind of nice. It's a nice distinction to say that you're part of the MVP program. Sarah, I do want to ask, because this is another question that's coming out of the chat room, is you did mention that you spend time with a boot camp. You teach a 12-week boot camp.
Yes, I do.
Can you tell me a little bit about that? Because I know our audience, especially the folks who perhaps are looking to get into coding, they've heard about the usage of boot camps. They've heard that maybe that might be the thing for them. What what's a typical boot camp look like, and how did you get involved with it? And then how do you teach at a training intensive event like a boot camp?
Okay, so to start, so I've been with this coding boot camp officially since August of 2014, unofficially since they had their first cohort in June of 2013. How I got involved with it was through their founder, Eric Wise. So I am a teaching assistant here at the Software Guild in Akron, Ohio. And Eric was doing tours of the user groups. He was speaking on some topic, and I can remember seeing an email going, I have to go to this user group. And my husband was like, Sarah, what's wrong? You've got this look of concern. I'm like, I got to see who the speaker is. And I noticed the name, and my husband's like, what's the name? I'm like, Eric Wise. And he's like, is that the guy who I used to play Quake with in college? I'm like, yes, it is, I think. That's why I had to go. And so when I talked to Eric at the user group, he told me about this idea for the Software Craftsmanship Guild, which is what it was called before. So I told him, if you are going to bring it here to the Cleveland area, let me know, because I'm a native Clevelander. This is my home base. So I know the area a little bit more. Let me help. And so in June of 2013, he said, Sarah, I'm doing this. And so I came down for a little bit. And then in the process, I got pregnant, had another kid. And then when I came back from maternity leave, Eric said, hey, Sarah, we can bring you on board. My role here, so sometimes I'm teaching in front of the classroom, talking to them about user experience, talking to them about web development, talking to them about C# or Java, or just object-oriented concepts in general. Or sometimes I'm going and visiting them individually and having one-on-one sessions of, okay, what don't you understand? Let's try to explain it with a different example. Or like the other thing that I'm doing, a part of my role here is curriculum development. So in the classroom, while I'm listening to our apprentices and the questions that they have, I'm taking in the feedback of, okay, we're not explaining this better. We need better examples. So then I go back to our curriculum development guys and say, okay, this is what we need to do in the curriculum to make things better. And sometimes I'm also helping write the curriculum that's coming up. So fun times. But it's a crazy pace. It's 12 weeks. It's intense. It's not for everybody, but it's for the people who want to learn this stuff and who want to learn from other people who are passionate about it and who can dedicate the amount of time. I mean, we've got 6 to 8 weeks before our 12-week boot camp, they're doing pre-work. They're looking at HTML. They're looking at CSS. They're looking at JavaScript. They're spending about 20 hours a week doing work on this stuff. And then when we bring them in, they're spending 40, 60, sometimes 80 hours a week, depending on the apprentice, focused on, we start out with object-oriented principles with the respective language. Then we go into web development. Then we go into database development. And they work in teams, and they have projects that show their understanding of these concepts and making sure that they can implement these. So that at the end of 12 weeks, once they finish the program, once they have the certificate, they can possibly be working in a junior level position.
See, that's interesting. I am used to, my background for teaching is I would teach at a high school and then at a university, and I would get 20 to 22 weeks. And that was one semester, and they were expected to take 2, 3, 4, 6 semesters of that particular subject. So my material was very, very spread out. I could go very, very slow. I can't imagine what it would be like to teach at a boot camp where I'm expected to take someone from very basic knowledge to could get a position, could get a job, an entry-level job in 12 weeks. I know you already said that it's not for everybody. Yeah, it's very condensed, but what are you looking for? I'm sure you have students who don't make it. Can you quickly suss out which students are going to make it and which ones aren't?
Sure. So first of all, they have to pass an assessment. So we have about a 30-question assessment checking, do you understand pattern matching? Do you understand logic? Do you understand general problem solving? From there, there's an interview process, and if we spot any red flags, that may stop you. So it's one of those where if we see that you have maybe some social issues that we can't help at all, we may say, okay, that's not right for you. Or we may talk with you and ask you some questions to see, why do you want to get into this field? Because if you want to get into it with passion, drive, excitement, curiosity, that's one thing. If you want to get into it because your mom wants you to go here, or because your grandma's going to pay for you to go here, the motivation there is totally different. So it's one of those, we look at these things. We look at what's your background. We look at your story, and we look at how do you communicate? How do you portray yourself? Then when it comes time to do the pre-work, are you doing the pre-work? Are you submitting it on time? Are you submitting it in the way that we ask you to. Are you also working with our staff properly, or are you giving our staff a hard time? Because if you're giving our staff a hard time, that's going to raise a red flag for us as well. Because if you're giving them a hard time via email, we know once you arrive here in person, you're going to be just as painful possibly. So those are just some of the things that we look at.
It's interesting because one of the questions we've asked a lot of our Wildcard interviewees has been, what do you need to be a programmer? What do you need to be a coder? Not just someone who will sit down and write code, but someone who actually enjoys it, who could turn it into a career. And it sounds as if your weeding out process is a way of essentially saying, are you coming here because you see the career as a way to make a lot of money and potentially support yourself? Or are you coming here because you have a passion and you want to turn it into a career? The second is great. The first doesn't always turn out so well. What kind of fail-through rate do you typically see? Take a typical 12-week boot camp. How many are going to make it to the end and reach a point where you think they could get hired?
Now, this is totally guessing on my part based on the cohorts I've seen here. Our cohorts are about anywhere from as little as I've seen as little as 9 people to as full as 16 people per group. And that's just for C# or for Java. Of that, I would say probably a couple may fail out on the pre-work, and then we might have a couple who will fail throughout the program. And that's just one of those things. If they're failing in the program, it's either they're not doing the pre-work, so they're not prepared, they're not doing homework, they're not doing lab work, or they don't understand something and they silently fail. So it's one of those where you ask if there's any questions, they look at you quietly. They don't ask any questions. They don't come to us teaching assistants and say, hey, by the way, I need help with this. So by not asking for help, they're going to silently fail. And there's nothing we can do other than keep prodding for feedback, keep asking questions, and say, okay, for those of you guys who might silently fail, how can we prevent this from happening?
So, sir, one of the things that you mentioned was, actually one frequent question we get is, how do you get noticed when it comes to these types of things and when, for getting a job and so on? And one thing that you do really well is community-based work. What keeps you motivated? What keeps you kind of doing these things, or what keeps you kind of putting yourself out there and doing this type of work?
No, for me, it's just doing what I love. I've loved tech for as long as I can remember. And then the whole teaching part, I mean, my parents, they raised me 13 years of Catholic education, so they always tell me, use your God-given talents to help others when you can. So I use that as part of my drive. And so it's one of those, I help, there's a weekend in July here in Cleveland. We do something called Cleveland Give Camp, where we donate our weekend, developers, designers, project managers, the like. We help nonprofits by giving them websites, giving them mobile apps, just based on a weekend's worth of work. And then here at the Guild, because I have the ability to translate tech into non-tech, coming from non-technical parents, I mean, that makes my life a lot easier here. And then seeing those aha moments, seeing that everything is an object, oh, that's what that means. Seeing that, I love it.
You've just nailed the thing I love about teaching. Actually, the thing I love about doing the work I'm doing right now is every once in a while, not often, but every once in a while, you're treated to seeing someone break down a problem that they had, or break down a wall that they had to the next step of logic, or break down a preconceived notion of what it means to do X, Y, or Z. And those are fantastic. I'm absolutely with you. Sarah, we need to take a break right now, but when we come back, there's something that Lou and I do want to talk to you about. Well, how do we put this discreetly? We don't get a lot of women on Coding 101. We don't get a lot of women who are good at doing this because there's just not as much encouragement. At least in previous generations, there hasn't been a really big push to get women in science, technology, engineering, math, and of course programming. Would you be willing to talk a little bit about the work that you do to encourage the better sex to come into computer programming?
I don't know necessarily the better sex. We have our own quirks, but yeah, let's talk about that after break. I'm cool for that. Fantastic.
When we come back, we're going to be speaking with Sarah Dutkiewicz. Did I say that right? Yes?
You did.
Fantastic.
Yes.
I got it. Okay, I will mess up the next time. We'll be right back with her, but first let's go ahead and thank the first sponsor of this episode of Coding 101. Now, let me ask you something. When you set up a service, an app, how do you do it? Do you do it the old-fashioned way of actually getting yourself a colo, getting yourself physical servers, setting them up, making sure your configuration is right, making sure that the security is always up to date because, well, you don't ever want your customer information to get owned? Well, you could do that. That's fine. That's kind of old school. But if you're really into punishment and you're really into spending way more money than you need, yes, that's an option. Or you could go with DigitalOcean. Now, DigitalOcean is a different way of standing up your projects. Rather than owning the servers, rather than setting up all the agreements to get yourself peered across geographical locations, you could just create what's called a droplet that runs on DigitalOcean servers across a region, across a country, across the globe. Now, the nice thing about DigitalOcean is that essentially anything that you can bundle up into an app or a service can run on their cloud. It's built for developers, and it's used by over 400,000 of them, including me. Now, what I use DigitalOcean for is when I have a new project, I want to stand it up immediately. I want to get it into beta. I want to get some traffic, real-world traffic, so that I know whether or not it's going to withstand the rigors of being deployed. Well, I can go from that very small droplet to a larger droplet that is open to, say, a larger beta, and then a larger beta, and finally production without ever having to move from platform to platform to platform. That's what DigitalOcean gives you, a path to scalability. Now, you can deploy and configure your droplets via a streamlined control panel or simple API. You can choose your OS from Ubuntu, CentOS, Debian, Fedora, CoreOS, and FreeBSD. And a one-click install allows you to quickly deploy apps like Django, Docker, Drupal, LAMP, GitLab, MediaWiki, Node.js, WordPress, Ghost, Magento, OwnCloud, Ruby on Rails, and more. All their servers are built on hex-core machines with dedicated ECC memory and RAID SSD storage. And their servers can have up to 20 CPUs, 64 gigabytes of memory, and 640 gigabytes of SSD. They're highly scalable, which means that they can meet the demands of your rapidly growing application or business, and they give you auto backups and snapshots, the things that you don't want to do, so that you can easily clone, deploy, and resize your droplets as you grow. You can deploy servers in regions all around the world with gigabit speeds, 99.99% uptime, and they give you full-featured DNS management to easily manage your domains or even use dedicated IPs. They give you web console access with HTML5, SSH, SFTP, and KVM VNC for virtual desktops, and they've got an extremely active community, which means you're always going to be able to find someone who can help you because they've probably had the same problem themselves. It's so easy to get started, you could start your own SSD cloud server in as little as 55 seconds. So here's what we want you to do. We want you to try DigitalOcean. DigitalOcean has incredibly affordable and straightforward pricing with servers starting at just $5 per month. And there's also hourly pricing available in case you want to do one of those quick betas, just to stand it up and see how it does with real-world traffic. And that starts at less than a penny an hour. But we're going to make it so that you can get started today and deploy an SSD cloud server for free. Visit DigitalOcean.com and create an account. Once you confirm your email and account information, go to the billing section and enter the promo code C101 for a free $10 credit. That's plenty to get started and explore what DigitalOcean can do for you. That's DigitalOcean.com, DigitalOcean.com. And once you sign up, enter the code C101 in the billing section for a $10 credit. And we thank DigitalOcean for their support of Coding 101. We're speaking with Sarah Dutkiewicz, who's a Microsoft MVP, a bootcamp instructor, basically a programmer extraordinaire, but she's also, I'm not sure if you figured this out, she's a woman in the sciences. So that makes her triply, quadruply, pentuply important here on Coding 101. Sarah, it's an indelicate question. It's so hard to ask this because it sounds like it's insulting, but let's be honest. In the field that we're in, we don't see a lot of women. Why is that, woman?
And I confirm that there are not a lot of women there, especially going to tech conferences. The guys have to wait for the restrooms. The ladies, not so much. We have some empty stalls.
The ultimate test.
So it's all good. The ultimate test. So we want to see more ladies in the bathroom. Wait, I don't think that's the right story we want to tell. So I don't know why there aren't as many who want to get into the field. For me, it was one of those that I was excited about computers. I was excited about tech. And part of me is lazy. So if I could write a script to do a lot of the things that I do, even better. Yeah. It's hard in the field not seeing a lot of women. Thankfully here at the boot camp, we have typically 2 or 3 women, sometimes 4 or 5 women in a group of 16. So it's nice to see numbers in there. And I guess part of the thing that I see, there's that whole women in tech movement. And they're like, well, let's bring in more women. Let's bring in more diversity. Whereas for me, it's just one of those, it's like, yeah, we can talk about it, but let's talk about what's fun in our industry. Let's talk about the appeal of the things that we do, and let's bring in people in general, not just the women. If the women are interested in it, then they'll come and play. If not, well, more fun for us anyhow is how I see that. And I know a lot of people won't agree with me on that, but it's just one of those, yeah, I'd love to see more women, but I want to see women who want to do this. I want to see women not just for the sake of diversity.
I remember earlier this year at Google I/O, I think it was The Verge that ran a story. It actually merited a post of its own. They were saying for the first time ever they saw a line at the women's bathroom at Google I/O. And it was kind of, it was one of those aha, funny, but at the same time it was like, yeah, you don't see that. There's not a long line, even at something like Google I/O, which they're really trying to push diversity. They're really trying to get people into it. You just don't see a lot of women who are getting into the sciences. And that's why we've got, we actually did have a guest on previously who was talking about her work with STEM programs, really trying to push science, technology, engineering, and math to women. So again, I don't want you to turn this into a political rant or anything, but as a teacher who at your boot camps can see as much as, can we say 25% of your students being women, is there something that you do, maybe even subconsciously, that you can now bring forward to say, look, this is something you should do. You should look at me. I'm successful. I know what I'm doing. I'm good at what I'm doing. I'm accepted at what I'm doing. To try to encourage them to take that final step. Because as you said, the drop-off can be pretty extreme, especially if you don't feel like you're going to be supported in your career.
Yeah, I mean, some of it is just one of those where I know some of my friends have dropped out of the field because they want to be stay-at-home parents. They want to focus on their family. Some have dropped because of the various different scandals of harassment at conferences. And that drives me crazy because it's few and far between in reality. When they do happen, they generate big publicity, but what conference, tech or otherwise, doesn't have that? So, I mean, if that's part of the drop-off, if it scares them, it's going to scare them in other fields as well. What can we do to, I mean, there's really nothing that I do that's different other than, for me, it's one of those, I talk to everybody and I listen to their stories and I learn from them. And I find that there are certain people in the community that I listen to and that I respect very well. And so trusting them and working with them as a guide and having them open doors and having them introduce me to people has taught me to introduce let me introduce other people to my network of people. So I think having mentors, whether it's same-sex or otherwise, kind of helps to get in the field and to grow to where I've been at. I mean, I've been blessed with the group of friends that I have, whether they're Microsoft MVPs or not, in various communities, Python, Linux, Ruby, Windows, Mac, you name it. Doesn't matter which tech. I have friends all over, and having those people and trusting those and keeping an open communication with them, I think that's part of what has helped make me as successful as I am.
You know, Sarah, we struck a little bit of a chord in our chat room. There's people who are talking about the gender inequality in programming, or just the sciences, engineering. And you've got some people who are saying, well, you know, why can't you mandate, say, a 50% gender divide for H-1B visas? I want to get your impression on this, and Lou, I'm going to throw it over to you later on. I understand where they're coming from with all of the big companies, Google, Facebook, Microsoft, Apple, trying to show that their diversity reports. But when I was still actively programming, the last thing I would want would be someone on my team who I think is there not for their skills, but because they fit a quota box. What's
exactly.
your take?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's one of those, I hate playing the woman card. I hate playing any other card out there. Take me for the programmer I am. Take me for the dev that I am. Take me for the community contributor that I am. Take me for the blogger I am. Take me for the mother that I am. Take me for all the different roles that I am. But don't take me just because you need to fill a quota. That's ridiculous. And I have been in situations where they've been like, hey, Sarah, can you do this? And I know that it's for a quota. And I'm be like, no. I can't do this. I know what you're going for, but at the same time, I can't support quotas. I have been on teams with people who are there hired for a quota and not for the skills. That sacrifices quality, and that's something I don't believe in. I don't want to sacrifice the quality of my work just for the sake of some company needing to have a diversity vision, plain and simple.
All right. Lou, You're in an interesting position here because you've actually had to help with hiring. You've had to develop teams. That's what you do. In fact, you are one of the most profitable departments at Microsoft right now. CRM is doing incredibly well. Do you ever feel that pressure when you are assembling a team to work on a particular problem? Is there someone coming down and saying, you know, this team really could use a little bit of diversity one way or another, or is that not even considered?
No, actually, I've never had that. I mean, one thing that I've had is, you know, I've had the luxury of being able to do hundreds of interviews and actually be able to hire people for the team. And the nice thing about it is, like Sarah said, I gravitate to the people that are just passionate about what they do, and they just really want to learn. They want to grow. They want to see how we do it. And I have some wonderful women on my team that just excel at those descriptions. And I think that when it comes to choosing projects, I choose people that might not even know some of the technologies we're going to use, but are willing to learn and are just passionate about, you know, leading things and moving it forward and just trying to understand the problem set and trying to tackle tough problems. I mean, all those descriptions, if you think about it, are things that all companies are really looking for. So I think it doesn't matter. I mean, the diversity obviously is very important in a business because it not only helps you think different ways, but people come from different walks of life. Sometimes they have different ways of problem solving. So that's also important as well. But again, I only hire based off of whether you're passionate and whether you can problem solve. And that's really all I go for.
Sarah, you slipped in Susan Cain there really, really quickly. And I do want to draw that out because actually she's a big figure in this. Who is Susan Cain to you, and why is she important? Why do you think people should look to her as an example of how you get into this field, how you stay in this field?
Susan Cain?
The power of introverts in a world that can't stop talking.
Okay, I'm like, wait a minute, I don't remember talking this tonight. But no, that is probably one of my favorite books because even though I speak at conferences, even though I go to user groups and organize them, at the end of the day, I am tired. I go by myself to a quiet place and recharge my batteries that way. I am truly an introvert. So Susan Cain and Quiet, The Power of an Introvert in the World That Doesn't Stop Talking is a great way to understand people who are introverts and how not to see us as quiet and shy, but how to see our powers of the fact that when we are quiet, we're observing and taking it all in. How to use those powers for the good and how to make the benefits out of that. I love that book. I love recommending it to it because a lot of my friends are extroverts. And so sometimes just to get them to shut up, I'm like, guys, you need to read this book, please.
Shut up for a second. Read the book.
Just 1 second. That's all I'm asking.
I mean, it's interesting that you say you're an introvert because you know, like you do so many community things, you do public speaking, you can go to a bunch of conferences, right? You do some public speaking. How does that of change the way you kind of view things? Do you think that introvert kind of comes into that play?
Oh, the introvert definitely comes into play. I mean, I've been speaking at user groups. So as Lou mentioned, I spoke at the Linux user group back in college in the late 90s. And then I started back again about 2008. Is when I got into speaking at the .NET community and other conferences and user groups and stuff like that. For me, the introvert, I like being able to go to the user group, observe the people who are there, see who else is in my field, see who else is out there to collaborate with, to exchange knowledge, to share passion, to be super excited about these tech things. So it's good to have that for me as a person. But it, like I said, interacting with people, it drains me completely. And so for me, it doesn't limit my conference things. I've gotten better at managing that a little bit, but still at the end of the day, I'm probably playing Cards Against Humanity with my closest group of friends. Or I remember there was one conference where at the end of the day, I was with a friend of mine. We disappeared just so we could log in and play World of Warcraft. So I mean, it's one of those, I need my quiet group. I need my small group who understands who I am and lets me be me for the me that I am.
Sarah, let me ask you a question here. You did say that you would like them to take you as a programmer, take you as a developer, take you as a mother. You are a mother, and you do have kids, and they are rather young. Do you teach them coding?
They were asking about this in the chat channel as well. And I have said, in due time, I will teach them programming. So my husband, he's an IT guy. And so he's just as geeky as I am, if not geekier. He's the hardware side and the networking side of things, where I'm the software side of things. But the other day, we were talking about showing our kids something cool in tech. And I noticed that the 3-year-old was playing with Play-Doh. And I said, hey, Kev, you just got some LEDs because he's making a torch. And so he went and he got his LEDs, and we put the LEDs, hooked it up into the Play-Doh, and then we put wires from a battery set into the Play-Doh, and then they lit up, and the 3-year-old's eyes were like, whoa, Mom, that's cool. And so we're teaching him about electricity and some other stuff right now, but we'll teach him coding once he can understand his ABCs first.
It's interesting because you're bringing out sort of the maker's spirit, and the maker's spirit, it tends to lean a bit more towards hardware, because hardware is something that you can actually get your hands on. But of course, there is a software component. I'm wondering, do you consider yourself a maker? Because I know that in addition to your responsibilities as a teacher and as a coder, you do like to tinker. Do you use the spirit of the maker in your work?
I am a tinkerer. I am a craftsman of sorts, because I like to hone my craft by playing and staying up on the whole, making sure to get better. The maker spirit, when I think maker, I think of the crafty people. And if you've ever seen on the social media things where they have like Pinterest and then nailed it, I'm nailed it. I am awful when it comes to crafting. Not crafty at all. My husband is crafty on the hardware side of things. So when I said he's talking about making a torch, we're talking plastic PVC and these bright LEDs that he purchased from China. And he's going to put them in the end of I think it's a birch stick that he managed to smooth down and then stain really nicely. So it's kind of like, think about like torches from Zelda, only instead of with fire with LEDs. That's what he's building now. So he's the maker of us. Me, I'm on the software side. That's where my craft lies.
I want to pull away a little bit and bring it more to the enterprise side, but this is still a crafting / maker question. Just recently here in San Francisco, we had the chairwoman of the FTC come out and speak to a group of entrepreneurs and startup folk, and her message was very simple, which is, we understand that the startup culture is pushing product to market as fast as possible. We understand that the spirit of the startup, especially in Silicon Valley, is sort of the spirit of the tinker, the spirit of the maker, someone who just puts something together really quickly to solve a problem and then gets it out to market. But her message was, it's not enough just to make something that works anymore. You need to start considering security. And one of the biggest points that she made in the briefing that she released to everybody was, if your software development people aren't thinking security first, they're doing everyone a disservice, especially in a world in which everything is connected to everything else. Which sounds good. In a presentation, that sounds fantastic. That's a talking point. But how do you do that when you teach? When you're teaching someone at one of these boot camps, and they're going to be, after their 12 weeks, they're going to be jumping into maybe one of these startups, how do you push into them that desire for security in the planning stage, not something that's just slapped on at the end?
Right. So, and it's funny because we just started a group. They're in their second week now, and the first week, one of the guys asked me, "Hey, Sarah, about security?" And we tell them, for the juniors, we want you to be aware of security, be aware of the ways that are out there that people can get in, but understand that our mid and senior levels are the ones who typically are there to guide you on that. And then we talk about the OWASP top 10 vulnerabilities. So if you're doing anything with web development, if you don't know about the OWASP vulnerability list, you need to know about that. It tells you exactly how people are hacking into some of these sites. And so you have to get into that a little bit. You have to get into the cryptography side a little bit as well and understand what's going on. For the love of all that's good, do not use MD5 to encrypt your passwords. Don't leave old users with MD5 passwords. Upgrade the new users with the new password scheme and leave the old ones there. Come on, Ashley Madison, hello. Not nice. But people need to realize that there are things like Ashley Madison, there are things like other different websites that have been hacked, credit card breaches, like that. But it's not just the software anymore. We have to remember that there was an article that came out fairly recently from Wired, where guys were in a car and their car got hacked. So, I mean, nowadays, anything can get hacked. It's a matter of thinking, okay, where are the weaknesses? Where can people get into my app that they probably shouldn't? And then fix it. And there are ways to test it. There are also people like ethical hackers. Those guys, I think you'd want more for testing because they know how to break things very well.
Yeah, we actually had a chance to speak with them at DEF CON Black Hat. So, yeah, very interesting. In fact, I think we're going to have them on one of our shows very soon. So we'll ask them all about that. I'm sorry,
cool.
Lou, I interrupted you?
Yeah, no problem. So I would say we're going to ship a little bit. I wanted to ask her a question. So for me, it's tough for like work-life balance type things. And I noticed that you do tons of stuff, these camps and with the guild, how do you stay productive? How do you kind of make sure that you have that balance in your life?
Well, I mean, it's one of those for me. My family has come first and foremost. And so you won't see me at user groups like I used to. I mean, I used to go to 3-4 user groups a month. We have 2.NET groups. We have a SQL user group. And there's another user group. They're like all met on Tuesdays. So all of my Tuesdays in a month were booked up. Now I might go to one every few months just so that I have time at home with my boys. Just so I have time with my husband if I get to see him when he's not busy with work. So it's one of those for me. It's like I have these internal meters that continue to go up and down. And so I have to make sure that, okay, if I feel that like one is too low, then okay, maybe I'm not going to go to this event here. Maybe I'm not going to do this thing. Or if I feel like lately I had been feeling that my community engagement was low. And so I volunteered to help out at Rails Bridge Cleveland, teaching people how to build a Rails app over a Saturday. So for me, it's a matter of gauging those. A group of my conference friends warned me about the thing called the wife acceptance factor. So for them, it's as long as your wife is happy, then you can go to the conferences and do the things. For me, the spousal acceptance factor is a little bit easier because, well, my husband understands, especially with him being in tech. But at the same time, you got to watch that. So
we've been speaking with Sarah Dutkiewicz.
You've been doing good with that, Padre.
That's 2 in a row.
Three.
That's 3 in a row. I will mess up the next one. Here on Coding 101, Sarah is a phenomenal woman. She's an incredibly talented programmer. She teaches a boot camp. She's a seven-time Microsoft MVP, and she's quite possibly one of the most knowledgeable .NET people we've ever had on the show. And I'm even saying that with Lou Maresca present. Unfortunately, we are running out of time, and I want to thank you so very much for coming onto the show. Before we have to cut out, is there some advice that you could give to the young programmer who's just getting into this game? This is one of these questions that we ask of all of our Wildcard guests. If someone were to come up to you and he or she is on the fence about whether or not this is a career that they might want to do for the rest of their lives, what would you ask for them to figure out? Or what hint would you give them to perhaps guide their decision on whether or not this is something that will give them satisfaction?
The question I would ask them is the same question I asked one of my groups of apprentices this past week during week 1, and that's, when you were kids, or in this case, since they are kids, do you play with Legos? Do you enjoy playing with Legos? Because software development, you're building blocks. In our class, I always use the example of, we're going to teach you about the small blocks and how to build a wall. Then your big group project is, now that you know how to build a wall, build a fort. So this is what we walk through. So if the kids like playing with Legos, that's good. If they like to do puzzles, that's a good sign too. I mean, anything that shows that they can do logic and problem solving kind of will lead them in the right direction. If they want to learn at a young age, there's a book, I don't know if it's still in publication anymore, but it was from Manning Publication. It was called Hello World by Warren and Carter Sand. It teaches programming in Python to kids, and it was written by a father-son team. So it was pretty cool. I highly recommend the book if you can find it. Fantastic.
Again, we thank you for being on the show. I would like to give you time to talk about anything you'd like to. If you want to throw them towards your boot camp, if you want to throw them towards your blog, this is your time to really let our audience know where they can find you on the internet, where they can find your work, and most importantly, where they can find you.
Okay, so where can you find me? You can find me on Twitter. Hold on.
Wait. Other side.
Other direction.
There we go.
So I am at Saduki on Twitter. I am there quite a bit. I am in Slack. So if you are in the Cleveland area, we have a Cleveland Tech channel. I am in Cleveland normally. I work down in Akron. I am at the Software Guild. We are at thesoftwareguild.com. These are some of the few places you can find me. I'm Saduki just about everywhere. So if you're on social media and need to find me, that's the best way. LinkedIn, Skype, you name it, that's where I'm at. Again, Padre, Lou, thank you guys for having me on your show. This has been so fun.
We're gonna invite you back. Is it okay if we invite you back at some point? Because I think we'd like to do a module with you.
I am definitely up for it.
You pick a language of your choice, and we'll just go. We'll geek out.
Okay. I mean, if the chat channel has any requests for language and what they want to learn, send it my way, and the one with the most votes, bring me back to do it.
There we go. And
there you go.
Saduki on Twitter. So everyone follow her right now and then tell her what language you'd like to hear because, well, we want to do what you want to see. Sarah Dutkiewicz, again, the owner of the Cleveland Tech. Is it the Cleveland Tech Center? Is it called?
No, so Cleveland Tech Events, it's a website that I started back in 2008, and it tracks the user groups in the Cleveland and Akron area.
Fantastic.
We are over 60 different technical user groups here. So whether it's programming based, whether it's Ruby, Python kind of deal, if you want to get into Android development, we have an Android meetup for that. We have Agile, we have Lean, we have all sorts of different things. We have a couple maker spaces in the area. ClevelandTechEvents.com. We keep track of all the different groups that are out there.
There you go, folks. Again, that's twitter.com/Saduki, Sadukie. Give in your vote. If you don't vote, you don't get to complain if she doesn't cover the language that you want to see.
That's right.
Sarah, again, thank you so very much.
Oh, thank you guys. Have a good one.
You too. Now, we do want to thank you for watching Coding 101. Coding 101 is a show that we do here every Monday at 2:30 p.m. Pacific time. You can watch us at live.twit.tv. And as long as you're watching us live, go ahead and jump into our chat room at irc.twit.tv. You can speak to us during the show, give your feedback, and we do try to answer questions, especially when we get to the coding modules. Of course, I couldn't do this show without Lou Maresca. Lou, if you could please tell the folks where they can find you. You are our super special. You started out as our code warrior, the very first code warrior we ever had, and you slowly morphed into our co-host, who seems to be in a slideshow. Could you tell the folks where they can find you, where they can find CRM from Microsoft, basically you on the web?
Absolutely. So you can always find me on Twitter at LouMM. And of course, all the work that I normally do during the day at Microsoft, which I should be doing right now, is at crm.dynamics.com. And again, always find us at live at 2:30 here on Twit doing Coding 101. And also, you can find me next week on Twiat as well.
Absolutely, yes. And folks, I'm Father Robert Balacer. That's Lou Maresca. And hey, Lou, what do we say at the end of each show?
End of line. Delayed.
And this, folks, see, this is why when we make fun of Skype and people say just use Hangouts, we don't do that.
No.
Skype still works better.